Thanks, Mike.
Good evening, and those of you who came early hoping we'd start at 7, I'm sorry we're about 20 minutes late, so it's about 7:20. We're going to go ahead and start the agenda for the code workshop. We'll go ahead and call the order again. The attendance roll call, I think we already know who's here. Everybody's here, but you want to go ahead and do that formally?
Sure. Okay. Mayor Trutman.
Here.
Vice Mayor Sardella. Here. Commissioner Samaria.
Here.
Commissioner Tudor.
Here.
Commissioner Weiss.
Here.
Okay. Well, I guess we have to stand for the pledge again, so stand for the pledge again.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Once again, I'm going to read the decorum rules. All public comments must be addressed to the commission as a body and not to individuals. Any person making impertinent or slanderous remarks or becomes boisterous while addressing the commission shall be barred from the further audience before the commission by the presiding officer unless permission to continue or again address the commission is granted by the majority vote of the commission members present. No clapping, applauding, heckling, or verbaling outbursts in support or opposition to the speaker of his or her remarks shall be permitted. No signs, placards shall be allowed in the commission chambers. Please mute or turn off your cell phones at the start of the meeting. Failure to do so may result in being barred from the meeting. Persons exiting the chamber shall do so quietly. Thank you. We're going to go ahead and open up for public comments starting now. So anybody like to come up for public comments? Okay, hearing none. What? Oh, okay.
Sorry,
Thank you. That's
to get
okay, no problem.
Notebook open. MacDonald Kennedy, 11705 Northeast 11th Place. So regarding code, that's a really important subject to me, so I'm happy to be here tonight, be able to say something about that. And I know this is specifically about the construction code that you guys are suggesting. So let me start by saying I agree to all of it in theory. So everything that's on there in theory I think is great. The two things specifically I have been raising hell about since the day we moved in: fences and porta potties. So really get that in the code and make it strong. Construction, not having construction fence is horribly dangerous, and the porta potties are just disgusting. We have porta potties sitting on the street in this village, so get them back. So yes to everything. I'd like to see some hurricane preparedness stuff added in there as well, because that was a real big issue in Irma last year. You may remember that I was getting upset about some of these sites that weren't cleaned up, and I went over with some neighbors and cleaned one up myself and put the construction material away because I didn't want it blowing down the street. And also add to it the mess after a construction project is done. There are construction sites all over this village that are done, permits closed out, and it still looks like it's under construction. Go past, am I allowed to name a property? No. 117th and 7th, 117th and 8th. There's a dirt pile there, 8 feet tall, that I reported to you this week. That renovation has been done for, I don't know, 6-8 months, and there's a pile of dirt still sitting there, and the yard looks like it's still under construction. So get the projects cleaned up and closed out completely. You have projects that are done and no landscaping's put in. It's not just a matter of what's happening during the process, but what happens afterwards as well. Now, in terms of what's written there that you guys are considering tonight, it's really vague, broad, ambiguous. It's not tight enough. So I think you need a professional to do this. I'm not sure you guys are the people to do this. Nothing personal meant by that. I'm just saying it's not what you do. But here's what I really want to say in the time that I have remaining. This village has code. You have lots of code. More code is not the problem. Do you need some things tightened up? Absolutely. And tonight you're looking at stuff that needs to be tightened up. What you need is code enforcement. You need code enforcement in Biscayne Park. There's no such thing as fair code enforcement. It's just code enforcement. It's not fair or not fair. It's just enforced. So enforce the code that we have. And when it's reported, do something about it. And when it's repeated, do something about it. And I'll tell you when people respond. When you reach into their wallet and you take their money, they step up and they don't do it again. And that goes for residents, and that goes for contractors who treat this village horribly, horribly. So educating sounds great in theory. It doesn't work. Fine people, fine people, fine people. Make them pay, make them stop working. When they do something that they weren't supposed to do, make them tear it down and go get a permit and do it the right way. So, hate to sound like such a hard ass about, hate to sound so tough about it, but It's the way it goes. You have a choice to either make us look like North Miami or Miami Shores. I pay Miami Shores level taxes. I prefer to look like that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir.
Barbara Kuehl, 111th Street. Again, these things appear, there's no backup where they came from, who wrote this, where the suggestions came from, what are we doing with this, is this supposed to be a code? This was done with an extremely heavy hammer. It's kind of a ridiculous, it's like one extreme to the other. It's like have no code or have a code that in a park, in a village like ours, you're saying that not only can't you do home improvement projects, even yourself on the weekend, but if Comcast wants to come and do something, they can't come either. Or if you want to have a door hung and you're working, well, now it's just too bad. I guess you'll have to take a day off from work. I don't know where these things come from. Was this supposed to be what the community wanted? Do you ever think of asking people, what do you really want? What has to be changed? Mac is right. We have construction companies that have abused us time and time again, and nothing is done to them. And they don't even get a slap on the wrist because they don't pay the fines. The homeowner does. And they just keep doing it. Yes, there are things to tighten up, but you have made this draconian suggestion list that I'm not even going to comment on all the different things because honestly, I waste so much time. It's like putting out fires with this community lately. Between the attorney, seeing that you're selecting an attorney tonight and our old attorney wasn't even invited, his name wasn't even on the list. So any logical person would think, well, I guess he's not in the running, to a code that you're suggesting a code that now you can't fix something in your house on a weekend. Give me a break.
Gary Kuehl, 777 Northeast 111th Street. You know, you start with a code, an ordinance, I should say, with identifying the problems. It isn't a shopping list of ideas that you pick from. So you need to identify what are the problems. I don't disagree that construction sites, some should be fenced. And the idea that it would be left to the discretion of a building official means nothing. That means you have loosey-goosey ordinance, so you're going to have loosey-goosey enforcement, if not corruption. You need to have rules. You need to define what you're going to do. And a couple of things I think that might be overlooked is the contractor who shall remain unnamed, that everybody knows very well, uses the residents that are under construction to house his workers. They live there. Yep. And you can see the cars come in at night, and you'll see several cars, and you'll see several people living in those houses. And I understand in some cases he doesn't own those houses. It's a little bit difficult if he does. We don't enforce our codes, and I say it all the time. You need to be realistic. If you're going to enact some of these things, how are you going to enforce them? If we're not going to have code officers on the weekend, what's going to happen? Because you write a code, it ain't going to stop anybody. Any Saturday morning, just open your door and listen. There's people working. And Sunday they're working. And crews are working Sunday right now, which I don't believe they're allowed to do. You have to have code officers on the weekend because that's when the violations occur. Step back, identify the problems, and start there, and then work forward. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any other public comments? Yeah, we're going to go through it first. If you could do it now first, and then we're going to probably open it up, but I just want to make sure we get through. So please come on up, Gage.
Gage Hartung, Planning and Zoning Board, 1029 Northeast 114th Street. I'm here on my personal, not on the board's behalf. Overall, I think I see what you're doing, and I agree with some of the ideas here. I disagree with some of the points, though. I don't believe we should be limiting people from working on their houses on the weekends. I personally work during the week, and I do like to work on my house, and I would like to be able to continue doing it. on the weekends. I'm also concerned about the limitation of having the Comcast guy coming to my house on Saturday or the AT&T guy coming to my house on Saturdays. The fencing around is great. I think you should add something there that the fence must be removed before CO, just to make sure that it is, if we're going to be permitting it, got to make sure we get it out of there. Regarding the portable toilet, I think there should be a line added to that the toilet must be on your property. It doesn't say that here. It just says, that should be shielded. Question regarding the two-story, new 2 stories at the setback up to 15 feet. Is that for just the second story, or is that the first story? So are you doing a step thing where you have a 10 foot, which is the way it is now, and then the second story at 15
No, I
foot
think
to
it's the
kind of
whole-
make it?
it's the whole
Because
thing.
it's not clear on that regarding that. And then the same thing with adding to the, regarding the dumpster, making sure the dumpster is on the property and not in the right-of-way or the swale. And that's my comments.
Thank you so much, sir. Anybody else public comments at this time? Okay. I'm going to, you want to tell what I actually called and asked to meet with staff because I wanted to hear from staff. One of the issues that I have had is that we constantly, or have for years, not really involve the staff who has to implement and enforce it. And do you want to talk about the meeting and who attended and that basically the question was, what do you need from us? The question was not what do we need to do, but what do you see are the issues that you're running into that the code is not helping you enforce? Because while some of the comments that came up when I agree with is that you can enforce stuff, the reality is without a code in there, you can't. Some of the situations from one of the builders that you're all referring to, living in the houses, using the equipment, that's stuff that we don't have currently on the code that we can enforce, and that becomes the issue. But I'll let you go ahead, sir.
Sure. We had a staff meeting. I had David Hernandez from Public Works, the chief there, Christina Caserta, their code officer there, a few other staff members.
Building.
And, I'm sorry?
Building inspector and also building clerk.
Building official. Yeah.
Building official, I'm
And
sorry.
the clerk. And so, and we discussed what we really needed to tighten up the code. There was a lot of feedback from that meeting. In order to make a cohesive meeting tonight, I pulled out just the construction because I feel like this is the more pressing portion of it. There are some life safety issues here that I would like to see addressed. As a result, we also discussed what we've heard from residents. And, the things that we hear, the porta potties, of course, fencing, of course, residents who aren't pleased when, after living in their home for 40 years, very tall 2-story house comes up next door, that sort of thing. And so we did take the information from residents into this and just put together a few discussion items for the commission to discuss and give us their input tonight, as well as the residents who are here to have input as well. So this is just a starting point for looking at some of our construction items. And so if you'd like, we can go through them one by one, the points.
Sounds good. And Officer Concerta, Chief Cabrera, and Manager, that's going to be hard to say, Public Works Manager Hernandez, if you'd also have any comments, please feel free to go ahead and chime in as well. Okay?
I'll share my mic.
If it's okay with the commission, I'd also like to ask if they have any comments before we start. None?
No, I think they'll come up as
Okay.
easier as we go.
Just want to make sure everybody has an opportunity here. So the first item was hours. Manager Manners, do you want to go over that issue? And I also like Officer Caserta and also the chief also to chime in on those particular sections.
We are fortunate in that right now construction in the village is up. We have a number of major different construction projects, and the code changes are needed to minimize the negative impacts to nearby residents. The hours need to coincide with village's normal daily business hours to provide oversight. One recommendation was new proposed hours of operation to be from 8 to 5 p.m. weekdays, weekends and holidays, emergency repairs only.
May I add something into here real quick? Because there was a
Sure.
couple comments, and I just want to make sure the office, in that, when somebody said Comcast coming to your house and so forth, any property maintenance, if this was discussed with everybody, any normal property maintenance, and there are things that are excluded, basically anything you can do The only problem I saw was that for people who do their own work, that actually do their own building, this becomes an issue because they do on weekends. Yeah. So this was the only concern. If you're doing an owner-builder permit and you're doing the work yourself, I think that's something we might want to look at to see what we can do to accommodate that. But I do know for things like right now we have concrete pours going on, and I think you all can, the police can talk about this, the chief can talk about this, Officer Caserta can talk about this, certainly the manager. What are some of the concerns we have with these types of works going on? I know we had several second-story buildings being put on over the weekend. We've had full-blown construction. We've had septic tanks put in. So, and even though they catch them, it becomes a much greater issue when it happens down the way. The other thing I'm just going to mention is I've lived around about 6 different construction sites. So I have neighbors articulating their displeasure with the amount of and the length of time in which they have to put up with noise and dirt and things that go on. And I've received numerous complaints. So when they discuss the weekend hours, I do want to say that we may have to look at what to do with people who are doing their own work and they're working full time. I don't have an issue with that, but most of the stuff that you're talking about that you said you can't do, you can do. So I just want to be clear on that. So if you want to call Comcast to come out at your house, that's not a problem. It's not permitted work. So I think the intent here, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I know we spoke about it during the meeting, Officer Caserta, this was for permitted work, correct? Correct. Okay. All right, so if the wording is not right, this is not an ordinance, this is just intent. So everybody's clear. All right? Go ahead.
No,
Vice Mayor.
I'm looking at the hours, and I guess I want to get clarification. Then I also want to hear from the audience as to how they're interpreting the language that's here.
Okay.
For the new proposed hours of operation, if I'm reading pressure cleaning, painting, lawn maintenance are permitted on weekends from 8 to 5. What with that and not much else, I don't know what's meant by that.
Okay.
Construction hours shall also apply, and excuse my speech, I had a dental procedure. Construction hours shall also apply to all utility companies, gas. These are things that I would also
interpret to
have the same concerns that were raised during public comments, because it's hard enough getting AT&T and Comcast to come out, and you can't control their hours. They give you a window of when they're going to arrive.
That's not what was intended here, so I'm going to allow the Public Works Manager. Go ahead.
So
There's two issues. There's maintenance, and then there's construction. I think what the mayor's trying to say is exactly, there's maintenance and construction. What is construction? Okay, TICO, gas. If TICO comes in and needs to put in a gas line, they have to come to the city. They have to pull a permit. I have to review that permit, placement, location, and the thought and the method of how they're going to do the construction. What do I mean by that? They're going to close the road, or they're going to have an MOT. Okay, that is construction, to put the actual line and make sure that when they go out there, they don't mess up or they don't destroy the right of way or the medians or actually do the restoration as how the city, or in this case, how Public Works is going to make them do the restoration. That is construction. Maintenance is totally different. That means that if right now there's a dangling cable, and they have to come out, that will be maintenance. That is not construction. So there's a clear difference between public right-of-way construction, which that's what we're trying to talk here.
Okay.
Where they come in and they're going to go ahead and set a new pole. FPL is going to set a new pole. They're going to come in and set a new pole. I'm going to have to review the location for permitting. How they're going to do the methodology of doing the construction. Are they going to close off a street? How long are they going to be there? And if I need police, if I need to get with police to make sure that they're not going to close the road for 8 hours and not tell anybody. So there's a big difference.
All right, so everybody's clear in the audience. This last bullet is not whether or not AT&T, Comcast comes to your house. That's not what he's referring to. This is Public Works specific things. Yes, Ms. Cool.
We're dealing with code, our code, and in our code it doesn't deal with the problem that maybe regulated, I don't think, in a normal community code. So when we see something like,
No, I understand, I understand why you read it and thought that. I just wanted to clarify what the intent was. It wasn't what you had presented. So I just wanted to make sure that you were aware of that, that's all. Yes, sir.
You know, if you look at other municipalities, they allow construction at 7 o'clock in the morning. And that's because it's hot most of the year. It's brutal. I don't like it 7 o'clock in the morning. I don't want to have construction next door to me, but realistically, that's really what you should allow. And you could end it earlier in the day. They also allow it on Saturday. Talk about the length of time it takes to get the job done. Well, it's going to get done faster if they can work 6 days.
Okay.
And also, while we're on that topic, I'm sorry.
No, please go ahead.
Mayor.
Oh, may I add, on Saturdays, they can start later. They just make it 8 o'clock.
The pressure cleaning, painting, lawn maintenance, if we can maybe talk about that one too. I understand the point of the last bullet, but even the pressure cleaning, painting, lawn maintenance.
Are permitted.
On weekends from 8 to 5 p.m. Let's say spring forward, during the summer, we have longer days, it's lighter for longer, and it's cooler, and I'm not mowing my grass during...
Do you want to just take that language out and just put, allowed on weekends? And get rid of the 8 to 5?
Yes.
I don't have a problem with that.
I mean, I guess going back to what I've said before, and even what Gary Kuehl said during public comments, what is it we're addressing? So what is the issue with people mowing their lawn at any time on the weekend? Was that a topic that came up?
No, the idea was what to make sure everybody knew they could do. Because if you keep telling people what they can't do, we don't have to put, this is not language for an ordinance. So the intent here is just, and I agree if you take out the 8 to 5, you should be able to pressure clean, paint, lawn maintenance, whatever time of the weekends.
Right. I guess I'm just disagreeing with this time limitation on doing your personal property maintenance.
So let's cross out, if there's no objection, let's cross out 8 to 5. And then the intent here is just to say that we're not stopping anybody from doing proper maintenance on weekends. There's no, unless you're doing, for example, and please, because Officer Caserta, because this is your arena, not mine, I'm speaking for you. So do you want to talk about some of the situations that where you would want to see, like you had talked about, for me, a roof. I think that was one of the issues, was are they fixing a leaky roof? They can't wait, right?
Well, okay, when you're dealing with the code, I mean, an owner can actually pull a permit to build a house. Unless they're incompetent, then the building official would actually retract that. When we're talking about, though, I do agree that owners should be allowed to do work on the weekends, but it should be limited as far as commercial equipment, the type of work, jackhammering, things that are excessively loud that would disturb the peace of the neighbors. So I think that we're looking at this more like, are we disturbing the peace of the residents who are home on the weekend who want to enjoy their time? So I would call it more along the lines of something like light duty versus that work can't be done by a homeowner on the weekend. And as far as the time period, you know, as far as putting pressure cleaning, painting, and lawn maintenance are permitted on the weekends from 8 to 5, again, that's discretionary.
We just took that out, so that's done now.
But I still feel that I do believe that light duty stuff should be permitted because people do have a problem taking off time during the week to maybe tile their house or, you know, interior painting. Maybe they're going to build a small wood deck in the back. So I think we need to think about that.
Let me do an analogy. So if you're doing your own work, and you could probably talk to this, I know I've done a lot of work myself. So if you come in and if he has a chipper, that's not light duty, correct? So if you're making noise and you're chipping up tile, that's going to drive everybody crazy for the day.
Yeah, right? I mean, we could
So
do
do
a
we have-
decibel. We could do a decibel machine where if it creates a certain level of noise, just
But then-
like you would do to enforce a noise ordinance, which exists out there in other cities, we could do a decibel machine too.
The only problem with that I would see is the chief. You're going to have your officers having the decibel meters and have to run out and...
Exactly.
Right. And that's where the problem lies.
Right. So it's precarious when you're touching on this because you're dealing with different emotions, contractors versus homeowners. Well, we don't want contractors working on the weekends, and well, what kind of work would you want to limit them to, I think is the question here.
And here's-
So we need to provide
One at a time, please. Allow Officer Concerto to finish her statement. Thank you.
So we need to really decide as to what are we looking at here? Noise, construction, how do we want to cut that down, break it down? What are we looking at? What does the village want? And that's the main concern right now. I mean,
Okay, now one at a time. Mr. Susi.
I think that when it comes to major construction, building a house, big concrete pours, after construction works of that nature, and it falls outside of our set time, a way to get around that would be a special permit, where they apply for a special permit through the village, and that whole plan of action, if they're going to block down a street or something, that can go ahead and limit the amount of work that happens when it for major construction. But for someone to replace a door or to
Yeah.
screw something into the wall of their house with a hammer drill a couple times, but it's not major construction.
So, go ahead. Sir, can you announce your name so I know your name? Yes. Okay. Go ahead, Mario.
Like, I want to remodel, right? And there's like a little place I want to do, maybe a little bit every weekend. But that's going to involve, taking out home floors, like taking out the village, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Is that nature right now? I mean, where do we draw the line, right? And even if I did have a contract to do that, as inside work, it shouldn't bother me inside. So, why we have any vision like that? Maybe external work should be limited, maybe external work that were visible, it's more than not. But this external, no one here, it doesn't bother me. You know, I think I'm paying it's noise now. You call them up and you go to the down the party and you turn them around for that. Let the neighbors have managed to tell it.
Mr. Kennedy.
Be really careful about this day and wording. You know, you're suggesting something like light duty, lightweight. That's up to interpretation, and then you're going to have all these cases in front of code compliance arguing over what that means. I mean, it's just there's no way to do it. But I have a question for you. Has anyone? We live in South Florida, where there are some beautiful communities that clearly are doing something right. Did anyone go to these communities and pull this section of their code out and say, well, they seem to be doing something right in Miami Shores, let's look at that and see, rather than start it this way?
The answer is I personally read, Mr. Susi can attest to this. How many codes did we go through, Mr. Susi? A lot. So we actually, because Mr. Susi and I sat down for hours on end, going through a tremendous amount of work to look at different cities. And
Themselves, or did they use professional people?
okay, if I may answer the question, I will tell you that this is not a code right. We had already agreed that somebody else would be writing the code. I think the idea is to come up with an intent when they write the code to do this. My intent of this, and I can only speak for myself, after Mr. Susi and I spent I don't know how much time looking at different ordinances, it becomes a decibel meter issue, and that's where the problem is. So if you play nobody, to be truthful, if you're doing something in your house and you're not making noise, it's like the tree that nobody heard. And you can say it's not allowed, and if somebody tells on you and your neighbor and they call, you could have that little drama. But the reality is, what you're going to really get people calling on is with what we had, which was an entire second story being put on, and people, we're putting on entire roofs, putting up septic tanks, putting entire walls in, concrete pours, major deliveries, dump trucks at 7 o'clock in the morning being picked up. So I think the issue for most of us, and I'll speak for myself, is large construction projects that you have to live next to for a year and a half. And I think that's, for me, and I think we are, and tell me if I'm wrong, manager, because you're the one looking at the building department, we're not undergoing a tremendous amount of construction relative to the history of this village. We're going through quite a renovation in the village with a lot of new construction.
There's a lot of renovation, and there are some major projects out there. It's not a lot of new construction, but, like from the ground up, there's a couple of those, but most of it's renovation.
Large renos. Yeah. Okay. I'd like the other commissions to chime in if they have any opinions on the first one. So the issue of what to do on the weekends. I think there was one suggestion from Mr. Kuehl to extend the hour to 7 a.m. because of the heat, correct? And I'm not sure that's a bad idea. I just know we'd have to deal with that if they decide to do concrete pours and things like that in the morning. Yep.
Didn't we have already in the past that we have, I mean, is this all of a sudden new that we're having construction done on weekends? I mean, how old is this village? I mean, you tell me this is the only time that we have construction?
No, we have issues, and I'm going to let Officer Couture, I'm not going to jump in and do all this because I know they've relayed this to me, but we've had a tremendous amount of issues on weekends. Do you want to talk about that so I don't have to? And the chief as well can talk about it.
Yeah, particularly on the weekends, we get a lot of calls by a construction company that we're all aware of. And, there's been concrete pouring on the weekends, which involves a very large cement truck, which ends up pulling across streets, blocking up streets, which I'm sure Chief can relate to you, as well as possibly even having contractors' cars parked all over the swales. And we get a lot of calls about these things. So we're trying to address not just the audience's issues, but the phone calls that we receive as well. So we're getting feedback from everyone, and these are the calls that I get, is that there's issues out there that we've got a lot of problems, not just Saturday, not just Sunday, but during the week beyond what they're allowed to do.
Vice Mayor?
What I don't want to see happen is that we take a contractor that isn't abiding by the rules in general, the ones that are already in force. Because I don't think if we decide to then overregulate based on this improper behavior, that person or that construction company is never going to do what they're supposed to do unless, unfortunately, the resident that they're working for is the one that's going to get the fines. But when the code is enforced and that construction company realizes that they have an uphill battle getting permits, doing stuff on that property, they'll either take less jobs in the community. I don't want to say too much, but this company that we know about knows it's difficult to do work in Miami Shores because they are paying attention. They will stop work. They will have stop work orders. So this particular company doesn't really like to do work in the shore.
And the fines associated with those stop workers are not $100. They're significant fines.
Right. So what I'd like to see happen with the way we handle things is to create a scenario so that we're not picking on a particular construction company, but we're making it clear that we want these construction companies to follow our rules. As far as working on the weekends, I kind of agree with Gary that if we open up a small window on a Saturday where they can, then the process can be quicker. We can get construction in and out of here because they have a little more time to get a job done. And if the noise levels are high, if we already have a noise ordinance, I don't know where we have to create something extra for noise because
You have to measure decibel.
We don't have anything on the
There's
code
nothing.
about decibels, so noise is really subject to it's subjective. It depends on the individual, and then that would really fall to the police department to deal with that. And as far as addressing the issues within the code and dealing with the contractors, specific contractors, I've had my hands tied because we don't have the language. And they know how to maneuver and do certain things. And unfortunately, even though we have this one contractor, there's always another one out there. And they do come in. So I need the help from you guys to strengthen it so I could do that.
And I agree, and that's why I think, again, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We can look at other cities and see how they deal with reining in their contractors.
Right.
Because
They have bonds and fines.
I had sort of the personal experience with this contractor through a third party and knowing what happened when he was doing what he does in the shores.
Yeah.
And, you know, he grumbles about it, complains, but he knows he can't do it in that city. So, you know, if we have to look at what is in the shores language that is keeping contractors in check, then rather than, you know, trying to reinvent the wheel.
I'm sorry, there was Gage, I think was first, and then I'll come over to this side.
I'll defer to Gary
So, heard from the neighbor's property. I don't deal with that part of the code, but.
I think there is a noise.
Light hours, this really refers to the evening. It doesn't, it wouldn't really affect construction. Most municipalities, as far as that goes, they do limit the heavy machinery in the morning. Okay, say if you allow them to start at 7, they wouldn't be able to use heavy machinery until like 4:30, whatever. Same thing on the weekends, it's a little more restricted. I think the idea of looking at decibels is
Ridiculous.
difficult.
Yeah.
And you really look at specific things that they can't do, no shipping, no heavy machinery, no concrete pours, and you can pretty much itemize those items. And actually, any machine, excavation equipment and so forth, because that's the stuff that's really going to be involved.
The only exception to that you might want to think about is the landscaping, because people do bring in equipment to do some of the landscaping on the weekends. I'm just saying that's somebody.
Drive up costs, and it'll drive up the contractor's costs. So you have to be careful. You can bet that it costs more to build in the shores than it does in Biscayne Park, and many other municipalities. And I don't think we want to penalize the homeowner, because ultimately they're the ones who are going to compare the ticket.
Okay.
I have a,
Go ahead.
on this one item, I think it's important, having done projects myself, working Monday through Friday, that you have to relax it for the weekends. Because there's going to be, for example, I recently put in a fence. The company came by, worked during the week, but they also had to finish up the project on a Saturday.
Would you suggest then, because there's been some suggestions, and I don't think it's a bad idea, and I think there's ways around that. You can color code it so they have the ability to work on weekends. There's different ways to do it, so that we can leave it up to discussion of the village administration that certain types of projects can be working on weekends because they're not noisy, and allow them to put those tags in. For example, putting up a fence, that's not noisy. You're digging holes and pouring concrete and adding some water. It's not going to...
You're also using power tools on it for a fence. Yeah.
You're sawing and stuff, but you're not, it's not a jackhammer,
also,
it's not,
people who are doing driveways, they may have to have a company come in and do the concrete work on a Saturday. There is that possibility. So I'm just saying, personally, I don't have a problem with, I'm fine with weekdays, having a cutoff time, but, I think you have to have Saturdays available so that contractors can do work on Saturdays. I think it's going to benefit the homeowners. You also want to be able to...
So you want heavy equipment on Saturdays?
I don't, at this point, I don't really see...
I've lived next to 6 houses. I can't concur with you on that one. Sorry, but I can't.
Well, I had a new home completely tore down and built across the street from me.
Yep.
A major renovation. Well, actually, tore down and built just diagonal to me. One right across the street that's been a completely major renovation. And you know what? It's it may be a little bit of an inconvenience, but I'm also looking at what's happening, what's going on, seeing the improvements that are happening in the village. So I'm a little bit more flexible with having work done on the weekends. I can understand, maybe, God rested on a Sunday, so no work on Sundays, period. So you could do something like that. But, for me personally, I think to shut down Saturday work, I think is going to come back to create some difficulties for homeowners.
I'm going to ask a question because this came up in the meeting, and that was, who gets to monitor that work so that you don't have unpermitted work? So, for example, somebody takes out a demolition permit. It's all the same company, most of you know this, takes out some permit and then does other non-permitted work on the weekend. Nobody knows until they discover it. A neighbor may or may not call, and then they get a red tag. But by this time, you've already got a whole wall up, right? Correct? You've got a whole wall up and a mess trying to figure out whether or not that it was tied incorrectly. Is that an accurate description of one event?
You're talking about on the weekends?
Yeah, well, this was a weekend issue. All the stuff was delivered, it was done.
I haven't had any issues with that personally because I haven't worked on the weekends, so I can't.
It was the police that came in.
I mean, maybe one of the...
Go ahead. Hold on. Let me
maybe one of the answers is actually talk to the village manager about staffing on Saturday, having an additional code person who.
It's not just code, it's building. You need building there too.
Well, who could, we may need that if we're having a construction boom,
You want to jump in and give your opinion?
No, that's certainly something that we do need, and we are looking into.
Okay. All right, so right now, just to get a consensus, we cannot vote. Just if you want to work on Saturdays or don't want to work on Saturdays, can the commission go ahead and give their opinion? My answer is no. I'd only like to see homeowner permits being able to do on Saturday or light work. Go ahead.
Having somebody using a nail gun or chipping up tile and having somebody take down a tree and use a grinder. You ever see a stump grinder next to your house?
Yes.
So, I mean, you're micromanaging into this ridiculous thing. The code officer may have a problem on the weekend because she's not working. That's the problem. We have always had a code officer that floats weekends.
Okay, but I think you're mischaracterizing. What I'm getting is a lot of people. This is not my personal thing. I get a lot of residents that I've got one I've had people that moved and gave up because they just had to live next to construction for almost a year and a half.
There are people that don't go to work and they're home all day and they have to listen to the construction.
I understand, but
listen to dogs barking, which to
okay, but if they're going to be listening, this is my point. If they're going to be listening to heavy-duty noise 6 days a week, and they're already listening to 5, I think having a day or two off on the weekends. If you have a birthday party next door, you've got your kids having a birthday party, and then suddenly you've got to listen to jackhammer and so forth going on while you have a birthday party, it impedes on your home.
You know something, this community, we've all seen work going on.
You're next, and then you're next.
And it's not enforced. There is no reason why any cop can't stop somebody from working on Sunday. It's against our code. We've always had you can work 6 days, and it really hasn't been a problem. Not since the new contractor has been demolishing houses and having this cruise. And you shouldn't punish the neighborhood and try to make ridiculous rules just because you have one rotten contractor. Nobody's had these problems before. And everybody, so I had a kitchen redone, I had workers there for 6 months. Everybody takes their turn. I had windows put in, you have trees trimmed. Don't start restricting things. And this ridiculous light equipment, heavy equipment, this noise, that noise, you'll never be able to enforce it.
Okay, hold on. Just 1 second, please. Brad.
Well, I think one of the points made earlier was, we really do need to look at other communities and how they deal with this. It's a good thing that we're building. This is a huge benefit for our community, and we don't want to deter that. But we also, need quality of life. And one of the ways that we need to make sure this doesn't happen again, like Officer Caserta had said earlier, there will be another construction company that will take the place of this one individual that we're mainly speaking about, company that we're speaking about. So the only way you will tackle this long term is to impose proper and hard fines on these people.
Yes.
It's the same thing as our police department. It's reputation. Miami Shores has a reputation. My homeowners have bought Miami Shores. They go into a project concerned about getting a permit because of the rumors that they've heard even before purchasing. So you have to be strict, and you have to enforce, which, again, I want to bring up one other thing. If we don't have enough resources for code enforcement, or we're not paying code enforcement, we don't have the budget to get another code enforcement employee, because nobody will work for the amount that we're offering. We need to consider looking into that further and increasing that and making sure we have somebody subject to it. And we also need to make sure that we're managing.
Thank you.
Going back to what you were saying about whether you're...
And can I have your name again? I'm so sorry. Thank you.
One possibility of, rather than adding additional employment onto the weekend, which
code enforcement, when you know the jobs that they've been permitted for during the weekdays, they can go around the village to those permitted properties and shoot a picture at the end of the day and know what's been done on that Friday to what they've been allowed to do to continue on for the weekend or not allowed to continue on, so that on Monday morning, when it's viewed, you've got proof of what's taking place between Friday and Monday, or whatever the given point in time is that their permit extends them and allows them to go. And one of the other points that you had also made about, for instance, of a party, somebody doesn't want to be interrupted because they're having a kid's party. Why not do something what we do in the film industry on Miami Beach? Is if I'm going to shoot in an area, I'm allowed to shoot on that property, but I have to get written consent from the neighbors within 200 feet, and they can only stop it from happening with a legitimate reason why they can't stop it. They can't just say, because I don't want them to shoot here. Well, that's not a legitimate reason. But perhaps a legitimate reason because I've already booked to have a party for my kids, and I don't want it to be interrupted. And that's something that could potentially be looked at so that we can all get along well. They can do the building, and we're going through these building pains, these growth pains, and they're going to happen. And I agree with the fact that we should allow for the construction and continuation on a Saturday, because it's going to prolong the construction anyway throughout the weeks to follow, rather than allowing it to continue on that Saturday.
Okay, thank you. You have anything you want to add?
I just do want to touch on this, just so the commission it understands that this is something I've asked for a while. I totally agree with imposing fines. I think that that's very big. I would definitely like to see us change our charter with the administrative citations and remove the restrictions as to what we can only give fines for on our administrative citations, and allow us to fine individuals right on the spot for violations. I think that would help tremendously with respect to this. I totally understand exactly what the community is saying, and I like the idea of taking pictures. I think that's really a good idea. And
Will
as
that
far
work
as
on the inside? Will that work on the inside?
what this gentleman was talking about, taking pictures of properties prior, on
the
Friday
outside,
prior. Yeah. And that's the problem with that, is inside, if there's work going on, which we have a lot of problems like that, interior remodel without permits, that's a common thing. Well, as far as, we do have a special event permit. I know you were talking about the permits for certain things. We do have a special event for that particular item, as far as having a party next door. So we do have that in existence.
But it wasn't related to party aspect. That's a legitimate gripe. I use that as an example. It's a legitimate gripe why construction shouldn't take place next door, because the kids are going to have a party. You don't want the jackhammer going off and all this to do in the party.
Okay, so you're saying it in the reverse. Okay, I got what you're saying.
If I may, we're going to be here all night if we don't get through some of these. So I think we've kind of beat the first one to death. Pretty much. I think the idea is not to limit work on the weekends unless the commissioners, I want everybody to hear from everybody. I think we beat this first one to death. I'd like to move on to the second one if I may. Unless you have further comments on the first one, I'd like to see if we can move on. If not, we'll be here all night. Gage. Okay. You haven't spoken? Yeah.
If I could just point out, we just spent 30 minutes on one item, and there are
10
items on here.
But some of
I
this
just
is
don't think
sort
this
of
is a
general.
realistic amount of content for one work session. It's just my opinion.
Okay. Thank you. One more comment, then we're going to move. We've had public comments, so I'm going to allow us to go through this, and then we'll stop and take a break and get more comments. Mr. Edmond.
As far as tracking work that's being done on a job, that is the code official, or not the code official, building official's job.
It's not code enforcement.
He's supposed to note everything that is in the scope, every plumbing, every temporary, every partial inspection is all noted. So as he goes along, he's tracking everything if he's doing his job. Trust me, I know. That's what I do. And, you'll point and go, hey, this bathroom's all roughed in, and you drywall it, pull it all down. So really,
You do this for a living, correct?
he's supposed to be tracking all that. And he has a permit that shows all that. Everything is noted, and he makes all his notes.
So we don't need code enforcement to be doing this point. Thank you.
If anything happens, it's his fault. If somebody puts a septic tank in, he knows. I mean, he'll see the earth all moved around, and go like, what happened out here? You know, and so that we shouldn't even worry about that.
Okay.
That is the building official. As far as work that's not within the plan, that's the building official's job. And the other thing that we're not bringing up here is we're going to have more and more building. So what we have right now is not even close to what's going to be happening in the future. So just think about that. We have one here, one there. Very spotty right now. That's not going to be in the future like that. It looks like we're going to blow up the building. And,
So you're recommending that we have,
just saying, keep that in mind. There's going to be jackhammering everywhere. If it's going the way I see it. You know, the investors are very happy with this area, and we should be, but I don't see why we can't just limit the work, the majority of the work, to the Monday through Friday, like every other job. And, you know, light work on Saturday, maybe you can figure out something that can be done on Saturday. Concrete portion's scary, but it's getting noise. There's nothing, there's, you know, the truck makes a little noise.
I'm gonna move on, because if not, you're correct, Commissioner Wise. Number 2, does anybody disagree that we need bonds, which we do not have? Every other city has bonds. Is there any problem with number 2? Anybody? No. All right, number 3, construction barriers. I'm going to allow the manager to talk about that, please.
Absolutely. All new construction and renovations will require the installation of a 6-foot-high chain link construction barrier on the perimeter of the property with full-length green or black screening material, unless otherwise determined by the building inspector. And that just simply provides the neighbors with some screening from dust, but also it blocks the view of a demolished house that's going to sit there for 2 or 3 or 4, or in some cases longer months. And so it also adds additional security, so that when a house is partially demolished, it becomes immediately an attractive nuisance. And I personally love to run through a house and check it out when it's like that.
These are temporary fences. These are not. We're not
Right,
requiring
they are
people to
temporary.
install. They're either mounted on a cross. Correct. My public works manager here. They're mounted on a cross, or they're put in by bags. But these are not permanent fencing that we're requiring people to put up.
Temporary fence.
Yes.
Temporary construction.
Okay, just want to be clear on that.
But
The purpose is to create a buffer.
just to add, if it's a construction site that does rise to the level of being an attractive nuisance, which you cannot mitigate, if something were to happen to someone who steps onto that property, regardless of them being a trespasser or not, that fence has to be closed, because like I've seen construction sites where people have fences up, but there's a gaping hole in it, there's, it's kind of loosey-goosey around the construction site.
That's here.
To me, that's
Somewhere.
that's not sufficient enough to.
It says the fence should be closed except during delivery of materials or other related construction activities and locked after hours.
Okay.
Just to address this. Yes.
Yeah, we need construction barriers. I mean, we've seen some of the properties, complete tear downs and such. And I do think Mr. Kennedy mentioned about making sure we have language in there about removal, because at a certain point, the only wording I had in here that, was the fact about renovations. What are we defining as a renovation? If somebody does a bathroom renovation or kitchen renovation, or
it's a
the way
remodel.
it's written, I got to put up a construction.
No, it's a remodel.
So I think we know. Yeah, we just have to be careful, and I mean, it's these little word definitions. The wording is
Is everybody?
makes us all understand why this is better geared towards the professionals when
So,
writing it.
yeah, at least I think the intent was major remodels, correct? This is not for somebody remodeling a bathroom, you don't have to put up a fence.
No,
It's only if you're
absolutely.
remodeling the actual structure. It's a structural
Absolutely.
remodel.
Right.
So
I think it's really-
It's basically to create the deterrence of unsightly views and to keep the construction, the dust from flying around and whatnot.
Right, so if you're doing an interior remodel of your tile, you're not going to require a fence.
Now, a good rule of thumb here, Mayor, is if the resident has to move out because the construction is so severe that there's not someone staying there 20, or at least overnight, then it should probably have a construction fence around it.
Right. And I think there
And
is,
so-
just 1 second. And also if they're adding a whole second story or something where there's a lot of construction going on, correct?
Well, I
Like we
mean-
had one incident on 117th where they put in a whole new thing, we ended up having to have a fence.
Okay.
And they lived there the whole time, but they had to
They
have a
just added
two-story
an
addition, yeah.
though? Okay, but yeah, they still need to have
Okay.
a fence, yeah.
Just really quickly, because I am going to be cognizant of time, everybody here, so 30 seconds for everybody, go.
Be really careful because we're talking about some safety things here as well. Right now, there's a house directly around the corner here on 7th Avenue that all they're doing is replacing a fence, and it's down, and they have a pool that is 20 feet from the edge of the road. I walked past there this morning and was standing there looking at a full-size swimming pool that any child could walk into and drown like that.
But that's already covered by the pool barrier requirements.
Yeah, they're in the middle of process of changing their fence out.
So that property needs to be secured. A child could
Well-
go in there and drown. in
Okay, thank you, I got you.
but-
Thank you. I'm sorry, Vice Mayor?
Just to comment on what you're saying, Mac, and that's basically the definition of an attractive nuisance. If it rises that it's an attractive nuisance, regardless of what they're doing, I understand if they're doing something inside, it's not creating attractive nuisance outside. But that for sure is a legal implication that I just want to make sure that we're not just saying, oh, well, if they put a story on or if there's a lot of rubble outside, anything that might create an attractive nuisance should have a barrier.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so we're all agreed on that?
I think so, yes?
Okay.
Yes.
Everyone was talking about punishing the homeowner. Maybe to look through the homeowner to the contractor that's actually performing work on the project.
There is some regulation, and that is one of the things that you and I had talked about, that ultimately it'd be nice to be finding these contractors and not always the homeowner. The problem is that's not so easy to do by law. And that is my understanding, but I don't disagree with the intent, is if we have a contractor who's creating issues, and that is the problem, that should be who the person's fined, not the homeowner. At the same time, if the homeowner is complicit in doing work without permits or something like that, you don't have a choice. Yes, sir, you haven't spoken once, so I'm going to let you have.
To follow up on what you were just stating, make it part of the permit process itself.
That's the bond.
I've been in construction and building my entire life. In Miami Beach, so to speak, the city will find you directly, the contractor, circumventing ownership, whether it be private property or commercial, entirely if you're parking incorrectly, if you're less good property.
For parking, yes, but what do you do if somebody built, okay. Can you get me any language that you have?
By our standards and by our means, you're going to get this very strong penalty the first time.
I think that's a great idea.
If we can do it, that would be great.
I think it's something that could be achieved by using the building official or the building reviewer when they look at the plans and they see the scope of the work. They're going to be able to determine, hey, we're not going to approve it until you show that there is a construction barrier.
I, and that goes back to your administrative fine issue.
My boys would love to find an open construction site, and I've seen people get hit.
You can go so far as to have them travel. For the vehicles.
Construction parking.
Right. I'm going to be pulling that section. Yeah. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Do you have anything else you want to add quickly, Linda? Because you've been having your hand up the whole time.
When I saw the wording on the fence, and it's chain link, I thought you meant a permanent one, or whatever. So maybe you put in the word temporary, so
Okay.
it's clear.
Okay.
And have some wording about when it should be removed and when the project is finished. It should be
I know you said that, but my understanding is you can't get a CO unless it's all done.
Well,
is that correct?
Yeah, when it comes to a CO, it's up to the building official to sign off everything, and yes, correct. Also, there's a clause that's in our code that talks about 10 days after the construction has ceased that they're supposed to remove all debris, and we
Okay.
can include the fence.
Yeah, I thought we
within
had that
to
already.
make it clear.
Okay. So, we,
So if you're planning to get a new flooring, right? So you need I guess, some kind of block outfit to throw all the old flooring into it?
yes.
Yourself? What do you get?
We're going to go through that when we hit dumpsters, so if you'll hold that thought, we'll move on. Number 3, code language is sufficient regarding portable potties. Is there anybody on the porta potties that has any issues with? I think there was one addition by Mr. Kennedy who suggested we say on the property. That's kind of a given to me because I guess I assumed you can't do it on the oh, sorry, who was the porta potty person? Gage. Yeah, I'm not sure who's the porta potty. Okay. All right, so that was adding on the property. Okay, so I think that was one comment.
Yeah, I think it's kind of covered with the behind the,
Yeah, with the swale.
require 6-foot construction barrier.
Yeah, because you can't put the fence on the swale, you have to put it on your property. So I
Right.
think that takes care of it. That's how I read it. Okay.
We've already got it about objects on the swale, so
Okay.
that we could cite to right away.
All right, so everybody's okay on number 3? The commission? Okay. Number 4, this was, let me think, I'm trying to make sure. Manager, you want to take this one over?
This simply stated that you can't have any building materials or construction equipment delivered prior to getting your permits. What we've seen are people that have all the materials delivered, don't have permits yet, and say, oh, we're waiting for our permit, but you watch the material just sort of gradually disappear as they move it around back and build. And so this just limits that.
And this is major, you're talking about major construction material, mostly
It is, yeah.
CBS and block and stuff. Okay. Any problems on that issue?
No.
Okay.
Well,
Go ahead.
now, what kind of impact would we have? I mean, I understand, the intent, but I'm just trying to think about possible issues with that. Delivering materials, equipment, supplies, blah, blah, blah.
Basically, you have to get a
If
permit
homeowner is
first.
building, let's say they're building their deck, but they're going to have materials delivered, but out of sight. It's not going to be located, in the front yard. Or it's gonna
Yeah, I think the problem here, I see your point.
Because that, I
Yeah.
mean, sometimes you have to get delivery when the delivery is going to come in.
Sure.
So, I mean, I don't want to kind of, there's got to
But
be.
that's a small
but there should be
project. I think the
some way
intention is
to-
like CBS
'cause
block.
I think this is more for, you don't want people putting
Whole additions on.
concrete block out in their front yard and have piles of stuff. I understand that, but, just the way it worded, I don't want to make sure that we don't, limit.
I think we have to be careful here because I don't think anybody's going to have an issue with somebody who's building a deck and brings some wood in and gets the permit. I think the issue is going to be if I'm building a house and we've had, I don't know, 2 or 3 second stories that have been put on without permits. We've had a lot of things that have happened that if the material wasn't there, it would have stopped it in the first place.
Well, I think this is addressed already, saying that the village shall not permit delivery of any building materials or construction equipment prior to obtaining the required permits. So I think with respect to that, that's pretty much...
That'll take care of it.
That'll cover it.
Okay.
But also our permit process, sometimes as a homeowner, you go get a permit, you may have to wait a couple weeks before it goes to the board, gets approved. You may have to wait a few days. So during that time period, somebody may want to take delivery of materials for...
But why would you do that if you don't know it's going to be approved and then you're buying materials you don't need?
Well, there's even sometimes a delay in between when it's approved and it's approved by the board to when the permit's actually issued. I had a
How long does that take?
I had a permit that was approved by the board, and it took several days
P&Z.
before I actually got the permit from the village.
Yeah, he's talking about exterior. Whenever there's exterior work being done, it goes to the planning and zoning department, and it depends on the cutoff date for the agenda. So it could take a while. But I would say, as staff, that we would look at that and say, okay, they got their materials, but they also have their application in. It's going through the motions, and I think, again, that's pretty discretionary as opposed to a contractor who gets out there and starts building a pool, digging the hole, and putting the rebar in completely without a permit or approval.
Yeah, that happened too.
So that's completely different. But I would say discretionarily, we can look at that and say, yes, there's applications.
If we don't want to leave it to discretion, can we say, okay, the application's been approved?
As long as the P&Z application is
So
approved?
The application's approved, so if you're getting delivery...
Or in
on
process?
stuff, okay, but you can't start building, obviously, until you get the permit.
You want to collect your money first. As a city, you want your money first before that, because someone could go through the PMZ process and then
Not pull the permit, yeah.
and then they just build. They want to collect your money.
And that happens a lot. We have had several people apply for a permit and whatnot. But again, you know, we do take these cases to the boards. So if we were to have somebody who would get delivery of materials and, you know, apply for the permit and actually get the materials prior to, if within a certain time period we see that permit's not pulled, well, we could take them to the board for both items. No permit and also getting the materials delivered.
Okay, I just want to, so we can try, I'm not trying to rush everybody, but I'd like to get through some reasonable time. Does anybody have any major issues with number 4? Do we have concurrence? We can move forward on that? Hold on one second, then I'm going to let you comment. No?
I've already made my comments.
Okay. Yes, sir, one comment.
To support what Will was saying before, though, based on the wording that I just heard of how that would be proposed, be careful where you all may come to agreement of understanding what the intent is of the wording, but what's to protect the homeowner of an overzealous code enforcement or building enforcement person that comes in and says, I'm fining you for having some wood pieces delivered for a fence that you are fixing.
I'll make you feel better. That's exactly what happened. It took me 1 year to finally get a variance. I paid all the money to get my fence put in, and then the person left, and so there was nobody on staff, so I got permission from the mayor. The new guy came in, and I got fined. So I'm very aware of what you're saying personally. So we'll have to come up with something in their language that addresses that, so it's clear, and they're not penalizing a homeowner for something that's a procedural issue.
Just something really quick.
And then we're going to go on, please. Thank you.
I also think that we need to fast forward a little bit as far as the permit process. So we have some projects that have taken extremely. We have one down the street from me, 2.5 years with a simple addition. Simple addition, 2.5 years. Boat parked on the front lawn, total.
So you want a time limit? So you want a time limit on?
So here's what I'm saying. If you want to encourage them to complete these projects in time, re-permitting needs to be looked at, and the amount of the fees for re-permitting need to go up significantly.
Yep.
It needs to hurt because a lot of these contractors, they deal with them. We'll be happy to pay $500 to go past the bill. That's nothing to them. They don't care. So it needs
There is some language, and I don't have time to do it now, but there is some language that kind of allows them, as long as they're working on it for the South Florida Building Code, to allow them to continue to do this. And that, unfortunately, that's a state matter, and that's not something, unfortunately, we as a city can really deal with that well.
No, they don't. If within 6 months, if you have actually had an inspection that passed, then you are able to automatically have it renewed for another 6 months.
So if you don't...
It's possible. It's definitely possible.
So if there's enough inspection activity. Okay, we're gonna move on to number 5. This is probably the one that I think we've heard the most from folks. I will tell you that I am the person who selected the actual height limit, so I will fall on the sword for that one. I did some research, and basically Miami-Dade County has, I think, a 35-foot, which is for the entire county. When I did some research online, the average height of a two-story building is 20 to 25 feet. The other thing that everybody must realize is that because of the floodplain elevation level, you have to build up in order to build now, so you're probably going to be anywhere from 5 to 7 feet on top of that. This height does not include that. So, right. And so I have somebody who lives right behind the beautiful new building on 117th, and the neighbors are at it because it's enormously tall because they had to build up the ground. And I've gotten enormous, I think the commission has gotten several complaints on that in that particular situation. I'd like, if I don't mind, I'm going to turn this over to Gage, who worked on, no? Well, you worked on the code review board, and so I had called Gage earlier and asked his position on this without telling him mine, and so I'd like him to express it since he has to deal with this regularly as P&Z.
I think it's a good idea. I mean, 30 feet seems reasonable for a two-story
single-story structure. And right now, we don't have a height limit. We kind of refer back to the county. And I do like the fact that, for second stories, we step back away from the setback more, so it's not as imposing on that 30 feet on the neighbor. Code review did work on this, and we basically came up with almost the same recommendation. We step back, unfortunately.
And to answer the one person who came in, I don't recall who it was, that is, if you build a new building, both stories must be a setback of 15 feet, not a single story. That was the intent. Even though
So the first floor has to be 15.
in other words, if you're building a brand new structure, the whole thing comes in 15 feet. If you think that's wrong, let me know. Okay, so the first floor at... Okay, so just the second floor has to be...
Right, it's a step
Okay.
back, not a setback on that.
Okay, thank you. So that, I have no objection to that at all, especially since that's what came up with the Code Review Board. Sander, I know you have a digit. Does that sound reasonable as well, sir? Okay. So does anybody have an issue with that on the board?
There should be a requirement for an accurate set of plans to be submitted.
Oh, yeah.
For the future of this, give a bit for sustainability and sea level rise is that where BFE is today, I think it's 8, is going to probably increase. And the real issue is that we all need to get flood insurance. And we're going to see, we don't pay actuarial rate of flood insurance, we pay subsidized rate, right? And the National Flood Insurance Program is broke by like $30 billion. They don't know where they're going. So we need to really make sure that whatever we do, we don't discourage your ability to build a house that, meets today's standards. And your measuring point should start from BFE. BFE is the target right now, 8, and they go to 11. Depends on what flood area you are. In different parts of Biscayne Harbor, different flood zones. So I think that's just something that's important. If you can't get flood insurance, then
Can't get a loan.
basically, it's sort of this, and Biscayne Park is in an interesting position. We, being all on septic, are really we're a very hot zone for where significant dollars need to be spent to help our community. So I just think we have to be careful with that. We're talking about the heights, we're measuring.
And if I'm not mistaken, I just want to make sure I'm clear. When this was written, the intent was, it's from, in my understanding, and I am not a building inspector. I was hoping he could be here, but he's out of town, correct?
He is, yes.
So the issue for me is where they were measuring that from, and Gage, correct me if I'm wrong, it's measured from, not from however far you built up, but that starting point up, correct? So the first floor, it's the base of the floor on up, correct? No, but when you guys measure, when you guys look at height or in a building, you're looking from where the building starts and goes up, not where the build-up is to that spot.
How about from the crown of the road?
That's the problem.
The crown of the road is usually 7 feet in this area. So if you're talking about 30 feet.
Just one person at a time, then Sandra, you can continue.
30 feet off the crown of the road, so to get up to 11 feet, okay, that's 5 feet. So you got 25 feet to build with this, and I think that's still reasonable for a 2-story house. No other houses in the neighborhood have 16-foot ceilings or 15-foot ceilings floor to floor.
Look, I think the 30 and 25 setback is a good compromise. I'm just saying that measured from roads that likely will need to be adjusted in what height they are at versus measured from, this is not about the road or the height of the building, it's about flood insurance. So if you don't use BFE, you're basically, whatever, if you don't use BFE, whatever the number is that you have to build a new house from. Because when you build a new house, it's not the ground of the road, you're measuring from BFE, that's what you have to do. Now you're saying, well, yeah, our code is 30 feet, but, because BFE is now 11, really you only get, I wouldn't make a variable like that. I would just, ultimately you're going to have houses that are built off of higher elevations, but that's you have to do with flood insurance. The ground of the road is meaningless for natural flood insurance.
Thank you, sir. I think we got to dumpsters. Sure, Gage.
I don't understand why the existing structures that want to put a second story on are not held to the same standards of the 15-foot
10-foot setback?
Because originally, when I thought about it, and this is where this may be on me and nobody else here, when I read the language, and I take ownership of that piece, and not the staff. At the original point, it was considered the whole thing was moving in. But you're correct. If you already have a 10-foot and you're putting a second story on. I do know that we have issues, what I call the back wall syndrome, where they leave that last wall in, and that's what they're using. So the idea was not to allow that to become a full structure. But you're correct. If the language is written as corrected, that shouldn't be an issue anymore, I would think. Okay. I don't have a problem with that. Anybody?
And why would there be a height difference?
The original height difference was because if you were, and the idea was this, that if you're going to sit at a setback of 10 feet and then you're just going to put a second story straight up, that you could only go straight up to 25 feet with a 10-foot setback. But if you're going to go up 30 feet, you'd have to move it in. That's what that intent was. Does that make sense?
It makes sense, but I think it should be, like, have one standard 30-foot height and then just make sure that the second story is set back with, the additional height.
I have no problem with that.
Yeah.
Anybody? Okay, we'll reword it to that language. Thank you, sir. Okay, so dumpsters, that was a pretty straightforward one. If there's anything there that anybody sees, problem with, anybody? Okay, dumpsters, everybody agree that's okay? Yes? Okay, dumpsters are good. The next one, yeah.
Those little flexible dumpsters, they can't be put behind. They'll only pick those up. They're like a few feet from the road. I think they call them
Waste bags.
Yeah.
They're really handy things.
We had them on one construction site on 100 and, what is it, 100 and?
You can't put them, they've got to be within like 10 feet of the edge of the road.
Yes. Yep.
Because
They won't
can't
pick 'em up.
And I think they're really a good idea, and they'll come, anytime you ask them. As soon as you call, they're like,
There should be a time limit though.
yeah, no, I agree. But those things are handy, and I just, maybe, they're not.
We might want to look at that because that's something new.
Dumpster in a bag.
Dumpster in a bag, the bagster, that's what it's called, the bagster.
How do we handle that now, manager?
And, they're really good. I mean,
I'm sorry, what was
How do we handle those now for remodels, major remodels? We
the
permit them?
Baxters?
Yeah.
There's really no regulation on those. Typically, it's the same as a dumpster as far as our perspective. They can't really put them on the swale. In order for them to be collected, they do need to be as close to the street as possible, though, and so I understand the predicament there.
Yeah, should they be sitting there, what I'm asking is things like a dumpster, it sits there filled and it's in one area. These, they're spread out. You could have 5 or 6 or 8 of them.
Typically, the bagsters get picked up faster than a dumpster. A dumpster will sit there until it's full, which can take days sometimes. Yeah.
The dumpsters are not as dangerous as the bags.
That's true. But the bagsters, they typically
Can
get
we
filled
ask
up
the building
quickly because they're
inspector?
smaller. I'm sorry?
Can we ask the building inspector what he recommends we do on that? Because we don't have any language on that.
We can,
so
yes.
I just don't want to be the one making a decision on something I really know nothing about. Maybe not out of the weekends. That's a good idea. Because that goes back to attractive nuisance. So yeah, let's see what we can do to tighten that language to make it safe. Okay. Yes.
About the dumpster being behind the fence.
Because the fence, once again, if you have it does and does not. If you need a fence, then you have a dumpster, it's going to go behind the fence. If you're not required to have a fence, like a roofing job, it doesn't say necessarily that it has to be in the property, but that's a given, but we can put that in here. I have no problem.
Yeah, because again, it's about, I was a little boy at one time, and I can't imagine anything more fun than climbing into a construction dumpster and seeing what's in there to play with, unless it would be jumping in that pool around the corner.
Okay, we got your point. Thank you, Mac. All right, we can add that language. That sounds reasonable. Okay, we're going to find Mac in that pool very shortly. All right. Okay. Fair enough. All right, traffic and public safety. I'm going to let the chief take this one. This is your idea and your suggestion, chief, so go for it.
Code is deficient and does not adequately address vendors blocking our roadway. This is especially true of concrete pours, delivery of construction material and supplies. So we're asking that they require vendors to follow the standard details found in the manual uniform traffic control devices, MOUs, MOTs, and anytime they impact traffic for more than 15 minutes. Maintenance of traffic, MOT permits will be required for any action that will block traffic for more than 30 minutes.
I want to thank Mr. Redmond because he helped me with the language on the first one. I did write this section as well. I tried to rephrase what the chief had written, but he added the point that that anybody who's blocking the roadway needs to use the traffic devices. And since you're the most eloquent on this, Mr. Redmond, you do this for a living. Could you explain what that is for everybody?
Well, if you're going to block one of our little one-way streets or the two-way streets, you need to close the street properly so that nobody starts down the street, ends up having to back out or go through somebody's lawn or something properly made. You got to close it. Close it. Road closed.
We're leaving it
for a short period of time on Black Man or something.
Right.
Codes are no good. That's not a device. It's not the purpose of that. You don't need local traffic only. I think everybody can figure out if you live on that street, you're going down.
You're out for a day.
Go to the mall. Go around or take another route. But you see a lot of concrete trucks blocking the road, and there's 4 cars all there. And they're all like trying to back out, use people.
Or 7 quarter-ton trucks and a concrete truck, yeah.
The contractor, and he gave me a nasty answer. He goes, "Who are you?" And I go, "That's what you got for me? Who am I?"
All right, so we already know we're going back to the same contractor. All right, so, yeah.
Is there any language in there that defines at what point you should accountability to the contractor, put that up versus the need for off-duty?
We had discussed that. Chief, do you want to talk about that? We could put language in there that requires that if they don't have their own flagman, yeah.
All of a sudden, the guy's got to decide for himself how he's controlling traffic. I'm not happy with that.
The purpose
I'm allowing the chief, go ahead. And I'm sorry, either one, you guys you can tag each other.
No, the purpose of this is basically to require that they come in, they turn in an MOT to
I'm sorry, Mr. Edmond, if you don't mind for a moment. Mike? Second, thank you. Go ahead.
and pull a permit, so then we can have all the information needed, including the proper schedule of what they're gonna do and what will be required. In some cases, it'll be a flagman or a flag person. And in other cases, it may require off-duty officers. And, in other cases, they may require signage.
Is there any language of it?
It's in the MOT. That's when they take the MO2, it'll be in the MOT.
That's part of the maintenance of traffic. The purpose is you'll get concrete trucks out there. They might pour for 15 minutes. That's not the issue. They might be in and out. The problem is they'll stand there for maybe an hour. And the gentleman's correct when he says they're going to start blocking traffic. Well, we're saying if they're going to go out there, they're going to have to come to us first. They have to come to Public Works. How they're going to block that road? What type of MOT? They might have to, like the police chief says, I might have to route them to the police because maybe they're going to be out there for 4 hours. So if they're going to be out there for maybe a few hours, the chief might make a decision that says, hey, in this case, you're going to have to hire a police to control traffic. It's called maintenance of traffic. That's the key.
Okay.
Does Public Works have to approve the building permits when they go through the building department?
I'm going to let you guys touch. That was a nice topic of conversation during the meeting about who should be signing off on the permits and what process should happen. So I'll let you, manager, okay.
Oh, do you want me to take? Okay. Well, when the building comes in now, what I've established is a process that anything that's in the right-of-way has to go through Public Works.
Now, for the first time in the village, yes.
Yes.
So maybe, we're small, we don't have a situation really where somebody's like occupying a street for, 2 weeks at a time, or you have like a marshalling area or a connect box. So maybe if you see that somebody's applying for a permit or, there's a lot of different concrete floors in the house or whatever, part of the building permit application, the contractor has to submit a plan, which is the MOT plan that they're going to use whenever they have these floors. That plan is kept on site with the building permit. And then if you get a phone call, code enforcement gets a phone call, whatever the problem, you can then it's like, well, is there a really good reason? Is this final? Do they just don't care? Whatever it is, but these are easy things that police want you to create. If the plan is going to public works, it is. Go to the LNT as part of it.
I think that's a great idea.
We agree with you, but we're saying, and that's the process that needs to be followed. But what happens here is, they won't put any information that they're doing concrete pours, or they're doing these deliveries, so they'll go out and or they can do it to avoid the process. So they'll do it on a Saturday or a Sunday, or block 2 or 3 streets, or they'll take these, their work trucks. And I've seen them park opposite the traffic, and have to deal with it. And it's unacceptable, they'll park in front of residents' homes and just tear up everything, and basically nowhere can we find anything, outline work.
And one of the things that happens also is that when that concrete truck is idle and starts to spin and you have a 20-minute wait, they're parked in the median, that concrete starts to drip. It starts to drip in the median, then you're going to have more of a headache.
And I think it's important that it wasn't highlighted at the beginning of the meetings, is when staff met to discuss this item, we considered a couple of things. 1, public safety, and 2, quality of life for residents. At the end of the day, it's what the resident wants and what's best for the residents that we want to do. You're number 1. You're a priority. You're what we come in and day out, work for, work hard, and make sure that the standards we have here are higher standards than anywhere else. We want that. But keeping that in mind, we also need to work with you, and you need to work with us to tell us, hey, exactly this is what we want. Continue moving forward. The way that things have been happening is you have these outside vendors come inside the village, and I love this. I take a lot of pride every day coming here to work. They come in here, and some of them do a great job, some create chaos. And it becomes a problem, and then there's no bonds. So many times I've said, even with these bonds, let's get a bond, let's pull a bond, let's find them, let's do.
There's nothing.
There's nothing. So I'm done with my speech. I just wanted, basically to know what our school of thought was when we sat down as staff, and we said, this is the ideas that we can come up with. The complaints we get daily, because we get them. I hear them, the boats, the cars, parking in front of the square, and I can't see when I get out. I mean, on and on and on. And there's people who really want to do the right thing. There's people who really don't care. They don't care. So, these are ideas that we brought to the table to help the residents. And you tell us what you want, and we're going to work hard to try what you want. Okay.
Thank you. I'm going to go back and I'm going to do this out of order just to make it quicker, and anything that we go on and we can't have time for, we'll come back to. 10, I don't think is a big issue. Does anybody have a problem with 10? I'm going to go 10, 9, and 8. Car covers not being maintained properly. This was specifically Officer Caserta asked that this be done so that we don't have nasty looking tarps and stuff on people's cars. Is there any problem with that? Nope. 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 Okay, so we're okay on 10. Anything from the audience on 10? Okay. We're going to go to 9. I'd like everyone to read this carefully. The intent of this is very clear. We have people now, we have a construction company specifically that is using this place for a staging site. They have cars all over the village, day and night, equipment all over the village, day and night, and we really don't have a way to stop it. I know that I have bothered Officer Caserta, the chief, the manager, and Mr. Hernandez, you haven't been here long enough for me to have chew your ear off on this one as well. But there are real issues. There are real issues with cars littered all over and the equipment. Not to mention living in the buildings. I did hear that, but that's not in this particular evening's code. But this really talks about how to prevent that. This language was proposed by the Officer Caserta, along with help, I believe, from the Public Works manager. So this is their language used to try and solve that issue. And also the parking plan, I think you mentioned for Miami Beach has a parking plan. You can have a parking plan, but once again, you have to have the staff to review it, make sure they're doing it, and then have a plan. So we did talk about, Mr. Susi and I talked about master permits and having that as part of the process. This was Code's solution, first round of solution to see if this couldn't limit the problem. Okay? And I just would like everybody to look over this because I think this will take care of a lot of the issues we have. And if you'll notice, by the way, Mr. Kennedy, on the right side where it says enforcement and fees and it says fines, that is there. It just needs to be determined.
Big one.
I heard you loudly.
I was just about to say the same thing. I'm like, do we really need 10 days to stop work before,
And is that weekdays, business days?
Okay, so I don't know what the construction norm is, and I don't know why we picked the 10, so maybe Officer Concerta could talk about that?
In talking to several different people on this issue, I was told that it does cost a lot of money to take equipment away and bring equipment back. So if we're telling contractors 3 days that, you know, they have the equipment sitting there and they're not using it and they got to get it out of there, it's going to cost them a lot more money to haul it away versus keeping it there. So I think we have to work with a reasonable time frame to understand that, you know, we don't also want to
impede.
Maybe having a shorter time period in which we provide them notice and they have to have a legitimate reason as to why it's sitting. And then if there's some they're waiting, because we all know, and contractors know, if this vendor is taking a long time to deliver that next item that they need to proceed with the work, and they say, you know, I'm sorry, I understand, or whatever has been there for 5 days, but we're waiting 2 days from now, whatever cement or whatever product is coming for us to continue building, but at least have a trigger so that they have to explain themselves.
Yeah.
Because I just feel like letting it sit for 10 days or 7 days, it just allows them to become complacent and do what they want to do. Accountability is what I'd like to see.
Did you have something, Dave?
I understand. But the intent, it's tough to identify exact days, but yes, the intent is obviously not to have them sit around, because they're gonna be sometimes they're gonna store materials in the right of way, and I understand that there's unforeseens. We all know, we all see an unforeseens, but I'm not glued to a date per se, but maybe we could revisit that specific time frame.
And I'd also agree that we have to start defining business days or 7 consecutive days. There should be some language in there as well on that.
Not allowing them to work on the weekend. They have to take Friday and bring it back home.
Yeah, I don't want to see it sitting there all weekend either. I mean, I have
So that's I do understand the unforeseen, but I think we can revisit that.
Okay, thank you. Anything else in this item? I particularly like the first one. I think that'll solve a lot of our issues. I thought that was well done. Thank you, Officer Caserta.
I'm sorry.
I liked the first bullet. I thought that was very well done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, so we're going to go back to 8. And the reason I chose to do 8 to end on, and I love the fact that we proved you wrong. Okay. Code does not adequately address, this is also Officer Caserta's, so I'm going to ask Officer Caserta to address this. You want to go ahead and just take 8?
Okay, code does not adequately address parking of commercial trucks on the swale. No commercial vehicles other than Class 1 vehicles are permitted to park on the swale unless actively engaging in a service to the adjoining property, unless otherwise authorized by the village. This is to keep the trucks from, I get a lot of complaints about large vehicles blocking the view of the neighboring residents trying to back out of their property. We're having a lot of issues with respect to that. So we're trying to eliminate those larger vehicles that seem to want to always park there and block the residents' view for the full day. That's what the whole idea behind this
I have
one
only
is.
one question.
Yes.
And that is one tweak to that. Maybe, and I'll give you an example. When I was doing work, so you're saying if they're doing work, it's okay?
If they're doing work, it's okay. They have to be actively engaging in the
Okay, then I take back my comment.
Deliveries, whatnot, that's fine. But not to have a big truck parked there all day long after they've delivered everything.
Okay. I have no comment on that. Anybody?
No, fine.
Does that include medians as well?
Nobody could park on the medians.
That's already taken care of by code. That doesn't mean they're not doing it. I think we're going to be having an issue on, we're going to be talking about a whole nother co-workshop on swales, and in that will come up the issue of what to do with the narrow streets and having people who have trailers who are doing work, because we also have to accommodate the homeowners for doing some work. So there is going to be a very difficult balance. I was very adamant initially when I first got here. I gave the manager an incredibly hard time, as well as the former, now Commander Walschlager, regarding parking on the medians. But there is some issues with trying to have vendors be able to do lawn work and things like that, and it does create issues. Where do they go? And so I personally have seen that to be an issue, and I know the Kuehls have also commented on why they relaxed that a little bit. So, but it is a challenge sometimes in our streets. So that's all I have. I believe we got through the whole thing. Sure, we can actually close out with a couple comments from the public, or any comments from the commissioners or the staff.
I've gotten lots of permits in the 3 years that we lived here. We completely renovated the house. We did everything with permits. We did it the right way. We got a ton of stuff done, so I'm very familiar with the process. At no point in the process did anyone discuss with me as the property owner whether I was using a contractor or not. No one discussed any kind of rules or regs with me. So I didn't know, and I was trying to figure things out, and I'm kind of particular about things, so I'm out there complaining about the little coffee cups they throw around. So really, I was like all over them, every time they were in the house. But it seems to me when someone's in front of P&Z, and they get their approval, and then when you go back over to get the permit, those are two opportunities for something to be handed to the property owner or the contractor or both that says there are rules in this village. And here's a link to them go to this website, and here's where you can read them in full. It's your responsibility to know and abide by them. And here is the schedule of fines that will be automatically charged to you. No warnings, no education, no courtesy notices. It's just bam, bam, bam. Here it is. And when it's not done, it goes from this to this. Hardcore, serious stuff. And make them sign it at P&Z. We need you to sign this. Take a copy with you before you go, and then when you go over to get your permit, sign it again, and you can take a copy.
I understand what you're saying. I think there was one thing that was brought up by Officer Caserta that she brought up that's not in here, but I'd like to see if a consensus on it. As it currently sits now, we are limited, but the way we've worded it in the administrative fines, and what she's asking for, if you'll repeat it for the members here on the board, what you're asking to change, because it does tie your hands, and that is part of the problem.
Right. But I do, what you're saying, Mac, I think that's an excellent idea. I think that we should definitely distribute more materials. I think that's a great idea. Yeah, it's a great idea. But as far as our administrative citations, my main thing with respect to that is my hands are tied. We've only got a limited number of items that I could actually write a citation for. So to me, it's nicer on the spot to be able to write a $500 citation for somebody who has an open pool and it's a life safety issue versus writing them because they have a little bit of overgrown grass, which is fine, but let's do it for the whole code, not just for 7 items. I think we should address that.
Can if nobody has objection on the board, can they look at how they would like to see it done and come back with us on the fees and how that should be done properly?
I think we're going to have to do an adjustment on the fee schedule as well. Look at that.
Can you look at the whole picture? Can staff look at the whole picture and come back with what you'd like?
We will,
absolutely,
yes.
Yeah.
Any objection from the members?
Mm-hmm.
No objections. But I did want to follow up with what Mac has said, and I really agree, and I think that we need to do that because the same happened with me when I moved in. And I'm just the type of person that will read the rule or be diligent, but we can't depend that everyone will do that. There's people that just don't know because they don't have the information. I've talked to friends of mine that are like, oh, I had no idea that falls on the property owner because the contractor did X, Y, Z. And, there could be plenty of people out there that want to be diligent, but they just don't know. And then that creates another line of defense as well, because the same way, Mac is saying that he was after his contractors for picking up stuff on his yard and stuff. I was the same way. My husband and I watching them constantly because we know we're going to get fined or there's going to be repercussions. But if residents don't know because no one's giving them the information, then that kind of added line of keeping people in check isn't there.
For those people, Jenny, that's education. For other people who you know have intent to not do things right, it becomes bam, right on top of them. And if the homeowner knows, contractor, if you mess this up, look what I'm gonna pay, you and I are gonna have a serious problem. Everybody will step up and watch what's going on there. Because again,
I agree with
said at
that.
the podium, when you reach in their pocket and take their money, all of a sudden they start following rules. When you educate them and talk nicely to them,
We got it. Thank you.
the story goes on.
We got you. Are there any more comments from the audience? Yes, Mr. Susi?
Stormwater retention runoff from properties, we were talking about raising grades now. If people are going to be raising grades, we have to watch how it affects the neighboring properties. So that should be looked at.
Yeah, the way it works now, all runoff has to retain on your property. So that we already kind of have that in there, and that, I believe that's also part of South Florida Building Code, if I'm not mistaken. I'll have to double check with the, yeah. Okay.
Plan required if they are going to raise grades to be submitted to Public Works for review.
That's good for the future, definitely. I think that's a good move. Yep. Any more comments from the audience? They're coming. All right, anybody from the staff and commissioners, any closing comments?
Real quick, I think these workshops are good. It's a way for the commission to kind of bounce things off, talk to residents, get good feedback. I also think that for some of these, especially when it gets to code, we should really be planning on having multiple of these workshops. Weeknights are fine. I think we also need to be looking at probably some weekends, because I think I've heard from some residents that they just don't have the time to come out here at night. So to be able to give the residents different options, I think we'll get a lot more feedback from residents, a lot more buy-in. But I'd like to see more of these, because I think this is the way to identify where we want to be, where we want to go, so that when we eventually, hopefully, get grant money for code rewrite, I can't say that, and if everybody's in agreement with that, we'll have something that we can go to the professional to and say, this is what we want, this is what we're looking for, this is the community that we want to have. Come back with the code.
Yeah, I just want to take a minute also to thank all the staff. I know you all put in a lot of time on this and a lot of thought into what you thought would work to help the residents with the majority of issues that are coming forth. So I just wanted to take a shout out to the staff and thank you very much.
Thank
and the
you.
fellow commissioner for staying so late on a weekday.
Yeah.
And the audience as well for coming.
One comment.
Yep.
I like to have as much as we can to have this stuff on the website, even way before we have workshops. That's where people can look at this stuff ahead of time. Meaning when you get stuff done, like tonight, have it up on the website. Let's not wait. That way
Right.
the residents can see it.
Yeah.
More participation.
Noted. Thank you, everybody, for coming. We do have to have a motion to adjourn, so is there a motion to adjourn?
Do you want the announcements or?
I'm sorry, announcement. I apologize. We have to have announcements. If you would like them, go for it.
That's okay. Wednesday, February 13th, 6 p.m. is the Public Art Advisory Board. On Tuesday, February 19th, 2019, 6:30 is the Planning and Zoning Advisory Board meeting. On Thursday, February 21st, 2019, 7 o'clock, Parks and Parkway Advisory Board. Wednesday, February 27th, 2019, 7 p.m., Public Safety Advisory Board. Monday, March 4th, 2019, at 6:30 p.m., Planning and Zoning Advisory Board.
And one last thank you to all the art board members, especially Amy Raymond and everybody who was involved in making a phenomenal event on Saturday. We will mention it again in our next meeting, but thank you everybody for coming. Have a nice evening.
Make a motion to adjourn.
To adjourn.
Second the motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
We end the meeting.
It's just going on for perfect.
Oi. Recuérdate que tú dejaste comida. Fuiste a la granja y dejaste la comida ahí. You better take it home.